He had not planned to stop. The road to the farm was empty, the sky low and gray, the kind that pressed on the shoulders and made every minute feel heavier than the last. The tractor coughed and rattled beneath him, protesting the early hour and the cold. He was already late. The foreman hated lateness more than broken machinery, and today there was a delivery coming, animals to be fed, fences to be checked. Everything depended on time, and time, as usual, was slipping through his fingers. That was when he saw them. They stood by the roadside near the bend where the old poplar had been struck by lightning years ago. The woman's coat was too thin for the season, its sleeves shiny with wear. She held a child against her chest, wrapped in a blanket that had once been bright blue but had faded to the color of a winter sky. The child's head rested limply on her shoulder. Not asleep, he thought at first, exhausted. He slowed, then cursed under his breath for doing so. He should have driven on. People like that were trouble, everyone knew it. Once you let trouble into your life, it found a way to stay. But the tractor was already crawling, and the woman had looked up. Their eyes met, and in that instant he saw not a beggar, not a drifter, but fear, quiet, contained fear that had nowhere left to go. "Where are you headed?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. She hesitated before answering, as if weighing whether truth would help or harm her. "Anywhere warm," she said finally. The child stirred, a small hand clutching the front of her coat. The tractor idled, puffing clouds of white into the air. He thought of his house, empty, cold when he wasn't there, but dry, with a stove that still worked if you coaxed it long enough. He thought of the keys in his pocket. He thought of the foreman's face when he arrived even later than he already would. "Listen," he said, surprising himself with how quickly the words came. "I've got a place. Not much, but it's warm. I won't be back till evening." Her eyes widened. "We don't have money. I didn't ask for any." He pulled the keys from his pocket, the metal cool against his palm. "Just stay inside. Lock the door." She stared at the keys as if they might vanish. "Why?" He shrugged. He had no answer that made sense. "Because it's cold," he said at last. She took them with both hands, careful, almost reverent. "Thank you," she said, and this time there was something else in her voice. Not fear. Something fragile, like hope trying not to show itself. He gave directions quickly, climbed back onto the tractor, and drove away before he could change his mind. The day at the farm dragged. The tractor he'd been assigned stalled twice. One of the gates was hanging loose, and a calf had wandered farther than it should have. The foreman barked orders and complaints in equal measure. Normally, the rhythm of work dulled his thoughts, reduced life to simple motions and muscle memory. Today, his mind kept drifting back to the house. What if they broke something? What if they stole what little he had? What if they didn't leave? He told himself he wouldn't care. There was nothing worth stealing. A table with one leg shorter than the others, a bed that creaked, a cupboard with mismatched dishes. Yet the unease lingered, growing heavier as the sun sank lower. When the work was finally done, he took the long way home without meaning to. The road curved gently, the fields stretching out on either side, brown and sleeping. Smoke rose from a few chimneys in the distance. As his house came into view, a thin line of smoke curled from its chimney too. He frowned. He hadn't lit the stove that morning. He slowed, parked the tractor, and approached on foot. The yard looked different. The scattered boards near the shed were stacked neatly. The bucket he'd left overturned by the well stood upright, filled with water. A pair of small boots sat by the door, mud carefully scraped from their soles. His hand hovered over the door handle, but he didn't open it. Instead, he stepped to the side and looked through the window. The glass was old and warped, but he could see enough. The table was wiped clean, the surface free of the usual dust and stains. A pot simmered on the stove, steam fogging the air. The woman stood by the counter, her coat gone, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back with a piece of string. She moved with quiet efficiency, as if she had done this 1,000 times before. The child lay on his bed, cheeks flushed with warmth, chest rising and falling in slow, steady breaths. She began to hum. The sound struck him harder than anything else. It was low, almost hesitant, but unmistakable. The melody reached back through years he rarely allowed himself to remember. His mother used to hum that tune while washing dishes, while folding laundry, while brushing his hair before bed. He hadn't heard it since the winter she died, since the house had gone silent in a way it never quite recovered from. He leaned his forehead against the cold glass. For a long moment, he simply stood there, breathing, listening. The fear he'd carried all day loosened its grip, replaced by something warmer and far more dangerous. He knocked. The humming stopped abruptly. The woman turned, startled, her eyes widening when she saw him through the glass. She moved to the door, opening it slowly. "I was just," she began, then stopped, unsure. He shook his head. "It's fine," he said. "Smells good." Relief washed over her face. "I hope you don't mind. I found some potatoes in the cellar. And a bit of salt." That's okay." They stood there awkwardly until the child stirred and let out a small sigh. The woman glanced back. "He hasn't slept properly in days," she said softly. "I hope you don't mind him using the bed." He swallowed. "He can keep it," he said, then realized how it sounded. "I mean, for tonight." They ate together at the table, the soup simple but hot, filling the room with warmth. The child woke and ate too, slowly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. He laughed when the spoon slipped, splashing broth onto the table. The sound of laughter felt foreign in the house, as if the walls themselves were unsure how to react. Later, when the child fell asleep again, curled up with the blanket, the woman spoke. Her name was Anna. She had worked once, in a town 2 days' walk from here. The factory closed. The room she rented was sold. The child's father had left long before that. One bad turn after another, until the road became the only option. "I didn't want him growing up like this," she said, staring into her cup. "But wanting isn't always enough." He nodded. He understood more than he wanted to admit. When night settled in fully, he laid out an extra blanket on the floor for himself without comment. She watched him, confusion flickering across her face. "You don't have to," she said. "I know." The stove crackled softly. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window frames. Inside, the house held. In the morning, the sky was pale and clear. He woke to the smell of bread warming on the stove. For a moment, disoriented, he thought he was dreaming. Then he heard the child's quiet chatter and remembered. They ate together again. When it was time to leave for the farm, he reached for his coat, then paused. "You can stay," he said, the words simple and heavy. "For a while. We'll figure something out." Anna looked at him, really looked at him, as if measuring the truth of his offer. Then she nodded. Outside, the day waited. Inside, for the first time in years, his house was no longer empty. Morning came quietly, as if unsure it was welcome. He woke before the others, a habit drilled into him by years of farm work and solitude. For a few seconds he lay still, staring at the ceiling beams, listening. There was the soft crackle of embers in the stove, the faint whistle of wind outside, and beneath it all, breathing, 2 different rhythms, small and steady, not his own. The realization settled slowly, without panic. Instead, it brought an unfamiliar calm. He rose carefully, easing his weight from the floor so the boards wouldn't creak. The child lay sprawled across the bed, one arm flung over the pillow, mouth slightly open. In sleep, there was nothing fragile about him. He looked rooted, as if he belonged there. Anna sat in the chair by the window, wrapped in her coat, asleep upright, her head tilted at an awkward angle. She must have woken in the night and chosen watchfulness over comfort. He covered her with another blanket. In the kitchen corner, he set water to boil and sliced the last of the bread. When the kettle began to murmur, Anna stirred. Her eyes snapped open, alertness rushing back too quickly for someone truly rested. "You don't have to do that," she said, standing. "I know," he replied, echoing last night's words, and was surprised when she smiled. They ate quietly. The child, Misha, she said when he asked, talked about a dog he once had, about a red truck he'd seen days ago and still remembered clearly. He listened more than he spoke, watching how Anna responded to every sound, every movement, as if the world were a thing that could still be taken from her at any moment. When it was time to leave, he put on his coat and reached for his cap. The familiar pull of routine tugged at him, the certainty of the road, the weight of work waiting. At the door, his hand closed around the keys out of instinct. He stopped. "I'll be back by evening," he said instead, setting the keys down on the table. "You don't have to go anywhere today." Anna's breath caught. "We won't be a burden." He met her gaze. "You aren't." The farm felt different that day. The same mud clung to his boots, the same machinery groaned, the same foreman shouted, but the edges were dulled. When his thoughts drifted, they no longer circled back to emptiness. He caught himself wondering whether Misha would nap, whether Anna would rest, whether the soup would last. On the way home, he bought bread. Then, after a moment's hesitation, cheese. He hadn't planned on it. The decision felt almost reckless. As dusk fell, light glowed in his window again. This time, he didn't stop to look through the glass. He opened the door. Anna was patching a tear in his old curtain, needle flashing in the lamplight. Misha sat on the floor, lining up wooden blocks he must have found in a forgotten drawer. "You're back," the boy said, as if it had been decided all along that he would be. "Yes," he answered, and meant more than just the word. That night, they talked longer. About practical things. About winter. About what could and could not be fixed. There were no promises, no grand declarations. Just small plans, spoken carefully, tested for weight. Later, when the house had settled and the fire burned low, he lay awake listening again. The breathing was still there, steady, real. The house seemed to lean into it, accepting the sound the way dry earth accepts rain. For the first time in years, the future did not feel like an empty road. It felt uncertain, crowded, difficult, and alive.